First of all, I want to say I used to go here. One of the things that struck me right off the bat is it's a Chicago slash Carbondale movie. I know it was mostly shot in Chicago. Uh,
Yeah.
the Western Avenue Brown Line stop with that 7-Eleven right there. That was my stop when I commuted every day to my day job. So,
Hey, that must have been cool. It's my stop too.
oh, really? Cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just nice to see a Chi-Town flick with actual, not only just the big,
I
Willis
know.
Tower locations and all that stuff,
Yeah.
but genuine neighborhood stuff. So, congrats.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always do try to make an effort I did with my last film too, to make it feel like a Chicago film without being like a Chicago film.
Right.
Yeah.
Aside from you living here and everything, what's the significance, do you think, what's the signature that the movie brings to your films that you really think helps it stand out, that particular flavor?
I don't know if I have a signature. I try to make things that feel pretty human and grounded. And I'm interested in stories that deal with personal growth, and sort of moving forward. It's something that I tackle quite a bit in my own life. And I'm usually making films about stuff that I'm dealing with, personally, and trying to figure out and haven't figured out yet, and making the work is sort of like my sort of a way that I tend to learn, about what I'm feeling and what I want to say, and what I believe, and how to move forward, just in my personal life, really.
And that's something, I had read that the Kate Conklin character played by Gillian Jacobs, she's just released her first novel, and she's asked to go visit her alma mater, coinciding with the cancellation of her book tour because the sales are kind of down. Now, I understand that after the release of Unexpected, about 5 years ago, you were also asked to come do some lectures, and that may have been the germ of where this idea came from. Tell me, why create a character who's an aspiring novelist rather than, say, a filmmaker? And in doing that making that switch, did you learn anything about yourself, or did you have to change anything as you were filtering your experiences into this fictional character?
I think that first of all, I think it's kind of like a little boring to make a movie about making movies.
Okay.
We've all seen those so many times. And maybe just like a thinly veiled transition to a novelist is not the coolest of moves either. But I think what I liked about a novelist is that it's much more, isolated in terms of whose influence results in the final, piece. Whereas a film has so many different people working together to create something. It's the result is much more collaborative, and less, or can be, I suppose. Certainly the way that I make them is very collaborative, and juxtaposed with a novelist, which is really, at least my idea of how it goes, is a person sits down and writes. And also I think, it relates a little bit more with my experience as being a screenwriter as well, which is, a lot of the filmmaking process for me, but not something that you ever get invited to go do a reading of your script, very rarely, especially, at like the independent level. And I learned a lot about the book world. I have friends that have been through that process, and I've also talked to people that were friends of friends or acquaintances that have been through that process, and that was interesting for me to learn, and just to learn about that world a little bit.
Now, in terms of the sort of the collaborative nature of making a film, and I'm curious about the screenwriting process, because so many of the characters in this film in particular feel authentic, just in their interactions, their dialogue, the way that they just kind of hang out with each other, it doesn't feel very movie-ish. And I mean that as a compliment. I understand.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering, how much collaboration is there between, say, you and the wonderful supporting cast that you have of these college kids? Are you able
Yeah.
to write authentically to those experiences and the way that they interact, or did you cast the film and then invite them to bring their own dialogue or their own kind of method of just interacting to the screen?
I wrote the script, and then cast, and we did work, I think in particular about Hannah Marks, who plays April, who brought so much of her own personal experiences to the role. And we did talk about the character and the dialogue and what she would say, and there were some changes made based on Hannah's own ideas, and but in general, the I'm trying to find people that I think fit the character that I wrote, and then through I mean, there isn't a there's a sort of a long time when you between the time that you cast someone and the time that the movie's actually shot, and you do kind of go back in as a writer and make adjustments for that. I certainly did, for almost every part, knowing the person that was going to actually play the role, and to go in and kind of be like, what, now that it's Jermaine Clement, I think he would say this. And I'm sort of like, probably a different character wouldn't have poured tea, or a different actor, I wouldn't have had pour tea for everyone. But that was a scene that I wrote knowing that Jermaine was going to play that part. And he brought stuff to it also, I think. I think that felt like a very organic part of the process to me.
Now, having said that, when you added your own kind of, say, Clementisms to the script, did he react favorably to that? He's like, oh, I would totally do that, or I don't know about that.
He had a pretty strong idea of like what he wanted to do. I think in particular about that scene with the tea, where like they've snuck into his house, and been caught, and he in reaction makes everyone tea, which was something that I thought, like I said, I was like, oh, Jermaine could pull this off. Like, maybe another actor, I probably wouldn't have thought of that idea, partially probably because he's like a New Zealander. It just doesn't seem like a very American move. But I think I remember in particular, I had it envisioned that he would have tea that had been brewed. I mean, this is such a small detail. And in my mind, he had tea that had been brewed that was in a pot, and in that scene, he was going to be pouring the tea into cups. And Jermaine was very insistent that everyone would already have their own pre-made cup of tea, and that he would be passing out the cups. And so I was like, all right, I mean, sure. But I was like, oh, I don't know. Don't you think it'd be nice to do the pouring? He was like, I think everybody would have their own cups. We went back and forth for a little bit, and then I was like, okay, fine. And so the props person who had already figured out this other way that I want to do it had to like then on set be like, okay, now I need individual tea bags. And I mean, there were moments. There's also a really great line in the movie where Gillian has been invited to speak, to go observe one of his classes. And after the class, she is talking to Jermaine in the hallway, and she says, thanks so much for having me. And he says, thank you for being had. And that was improvised. That's something that he brought to it. I think I need to go back and look, because I think I've said that in a few interviews, and I want to make sure it's true, but I'm almost positive that was an ad lib. And then I had him keep doing it, because it says so much about the, those characters and the moment that they're in. And he does it, he did it so brilliantly.
That is a great moment, partially because it took me like a minute to think back on that line and unpack all the different layers of
Yes,
being had.
yes,
It was kind of a shock.
yeah.
Um, so the movie ends on sort of there's a sort of a feeling of melancholy just under the surface of the entire film, even though it is, a comedy, but it ends on sort of an unexpected note of hopefulness and self-reflection that I wasn't expecting. Is that something that you had approached the script and the character with, or did you discover that kind of a note as you were creating the character of Kate and all the people that she was interacting with?
Yeah, I definitely discovered it as I went along, and really didn't come to it. Didn't land on it until the editing process. I mean, it was such a long journey for me to figure out what I wanted, where I wanted this character to land, what I wanted her to learn. And it's all very nuanced. It's not such a clean statement, I think, and part of it, as I was saying, like, is because this is an area that in my own life I think I'm grappling with, and trying to figure out, not something that I've already learned, about, and I'm just like, let me impart this wisdom on my viewers. It's really, and I often am making films about something that I'm struggling with, myself, and almost making the movie in itself is almost a way of like personal growth for me as an individual.
It's nice because it is a note of change, but it's not a declaration. There's an open-endedness to it. I think that was really kind of sweet. Um, Tell me about the movie release itself. I know back with the canceling of South by Southwest, coinciding with the pandemic and everything, there was a real question of how would this movie get to people. And I know it's playing at the Music Box. You did an Elevated Films event last week, and it's coming out on demand, and it's a limited kind of theatrical thing. Do you think that this model is sustainable, this sort of hybrid release model for independent filmmakers who are trying to get things off the ground now? There's a large queue of movies, I imagine, they're already kind of in the can waiting for release. But as far as the future of indie filmmaking, where do you think things are going if we're kind of stuck in this hybrid for the foreseeable future?
You know, um, I I don't know. I do think people miss being in a packed theater watching a film, and um, and I don't think that the desire for that is going to go away. I think that even though people are very comfortable watching movies in their living rooms, I think, and have been, by the way, for a long time now. And the movie was released day and date, or is being released day and date. It would have most likely had that release strategy, even if even if the pandemic didn't happen, because that's just been very common with releases in general, and certainly indie releases, the past few years. So in a way, I don't think it's that different. I do think more people would have had the opportunity to go see it in the theater. Whether or not they would have decided to take that opportunity, I don't know, because I think people were already feeling pretty comfortable watching, renting a new release and watching it, and curled up on their couch. But since we have been forced to do so, I do think that when things are safe, that people will want to go out and experience something different in a way that maybe they haven't in the last few years. And the movie had a sneak preview at a drive-in theater, on the south side of Chicago last week, and it was really special. It was definitely not something I would have anticipated ever being the way that I would have premiered a film. But it was the only way that a lot of people could come together to experience something communally, right now. And I think I felt the energy from that. and I think everybody did. And it was certainly the largest gathering that I have been to in the last 5 months. Everybody in the safety of their individual car pods, but it did feel like a communal experience, and there was an energy there that felt so human. And I didn't hear the applause, but everybody honked their horns, and I think it just being in the presence of other people, really, like, I think hit something for everyone that was there and able to experience it, that did feel very special. So it's different, in some ways. Certainly I have not had yet the opportunity to watch the movie in a theater full of people, which I'm desperately wanting. And I really hope that I will get that opportunity someday, especially with this movie, which is just, would feel so nice to hear an auditorium full of people laughing. Um, but but I'm just so grateful that it's finding its way, to an audience, especially with everything that's going on right now.
Definitely. But to end things, I want to ask a question that I've been asking all the filmmakers and artists and creators I've talked to since the lockdown began, which is because I talk to a lot of people who are either performers or filmmakers whose very job is to communicate to, their art is sharing themselves with people. How
Mm.
are you staying creative, in an era where everyone's sort of inside and we can't go out and interact with folks without, say, wearing masks?
In the beginning, I wasn't able to be creative at all. In the beginning, I was pretty depressed, to be honest. There was obviously the personal tragedy of my film premiere being canceled, and feeling like I wasn't sure if it would have a life at all. And then the collective tragedy of the pandemic, and then the tragedy of the killing of George Floyd, and the protests stemming from that, and the Black Lives Matter movement, which made something like a film release seem so trivial and unimportant, and grappling with the idea of of that being my career, my chosen career. And I think that lately I have been able to write, and I also, in the very beginning, also being not having a romantic partner in my life right now, I did feel especially isolated in the beginning, and now have opened up a little bit to hanging out with a couple of friends and having people over into the backyard, to have a beer or sit by the fire, and having that, has filled me with a lot more, sort of, I don't know, inspiration, or just making me feel a bit more normal, than I did right when things first locked down. So lately I've been writing, and I've been able to kind of focus on the imaginary world, a little bit more than I had the ability to do in the beginning. And I think that's been a nice, healthy departure for me from the sort of trials of our everyday lives right now.
Well, I'm glad that you've got that you were able to find that network of support and also strength
Yeah.
within you to keep creating. So, congratulations on the film. I too hope that you'll be able to see this with the large crowd it deserves someday. But until then, thank you very much for talking with me, and yeah, take it easy.
Cool. Thanks, Ian.
All right, bye bye.
Bye.